Let's enjoy ourselves at the hotel tonight. On a flight heading overseas, I overheard a couple's conversation from the seat next to me. Could they not? It's the middle of the day. Suppressing my irritation, I glanced in their direction, and it was the worst. There sat my husband, Mike, with his mistress. Wait, isn't that Mike? My friend tilted her head in confusion. Mike, startled, turned toward us. When he realized it was me sitting nearby, his face turned pale. There was no way he could talk his way out of this now. This was the end. As we glared at him, Mike began to tremble. My name is Kate. I'm 32 years old, and I work as an administrative assistant at a trading company. I met my husband, Mike, at a party. It was a party I couldn't turn down because a client had invited me. He had a handsome face and looked sharp in his clean-cut suit. He was easy to talk to, friendly, and had a great sense of humor. He seemed perfect. I've been wanting to talk to you, too. Can I get your number? Let's go out, just the two of us, sometime. Our conversation flowed naturally, and we went on a date the very next week. Everything went smoothly, and we were engaged soon after. Life after marriage was happy. Mike worked as a sales representative at a trading company. His career was going well, and he was even up for a promotion. He was still young, but his potential was highly regarded. I was so lucky to marry someone like Mike. Surely, there would be so many good times ahead of us. At least that's what I thought. But my happiness didn't last long. Mike had a hidden side. He never showed me his worst trait. He was a chronic cheater. I'm always working overtime and can't seem to shake off the exhaustion. Mike started saying things like this about a year into our marriage. At that time, Mike certainly seemed busy. We only had dinner together about 3 times a week. On other days, he claimed it was too late and said he ate at a place near the office. You really seem busy. Are you holding up okay? Well, I'm managing. They've entrusted me with an important project, and the pressure is intense. Just don't overdo it, okay? As his wife, what else could I have said? I didn't doubt Mike's words, but there were things that didn't sit right with me. For someone who claimed to be tired, he seemed oddly energetic, and most of all, he smelled nice. Mike would come home carrying the scent of a woman's perfume. Gradually, I began to feel suspicious. Mike, isn't something off with you lately? Are you meeting someone outside? I do meet with clients from time to time, but why do you ask? Mike insisted it was all work-related, yet there was something unnatural about his smile that made me uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mike was hiding something. I decided to confide in my best friend, Jane, whom I had known since middle school. Jane was the daughter of a major company's CEO and had a reputation for being well-informed. She had apparently built a vast network of connections through her privileged position. When I shared my concerns, Jane muttered, "That does sound suspicious. In situations like this, you shouldn't ignore your instincts. We need to investigate. Leave it to me." A few days later, Jane told me about a woman named Anne. She had gathered this information from Mike's coworkers. Apparently, Anne was someone Mike had been spending a lot of time with recently. A married man spending time with another woman. It didn't take much to guess what that implied. That night, unable to hold back any longer, I confronted Mike. "Hey, Mike. Who's Anne?" "What? How do you know about Anne?" That reaction, it was all the confirmation I needed. Unaware of my growing certainty, Mike quickly regained his composure. "She's just a client I've been working with. I didn't expect you to know her name. I don't know much about her. Jane just overheard some of your coworkers mention her name, that's all." "I see." Mike gave a slight smile, saying, "You surprised me there. but he also seemed eager to change the subject. I could feel a massive crack forming between us. Jane is someone you can truly rely on. Sensing my emotions, she went above and beyond to investigate the matter for me. She uncovered everything about Anne: her hometown, workplace, current address, phone number. The amount of information Jane gathered was so detailed that I was almost afraid to ask how she had done it. She seems to love luxury and is careless with money. It looks like she's made quite a few men spend on her before. What? So Mike too? That's a real possibility. That night, I went straight to Mike's credit card statements as soon as I got home. As I feared, there were purchases for luxury brand bags and accessories. Unable to sit still, I confronted Mike the moment he walked through the door. What's this all about? These bags and accessories on your statement, I've never even seen them. Oh, those? They were gifts for a client's birthday. Part of work. Don't give me that look. Mike turned his face away with an annoyed expression, as if trying to say he was being unfairly accused. Later, I discovered that Mike was racking up debt. It seemed he had spent excessively on gifts, and his installment payments were piling up. If this continued, it felt inevitable that I'd be dragged into Mike's financial ruin someday. A small fear crept into my mind, stopping me from pressing him further. Hey, Kate, is it true your husband's cheating on you? One day at work, a tactless coworker hit me with this insensitive question. I was stunned. How did such a rumor spread? And from where? Who told you that? I'd appreciate it if you didn't spread weird gossip like that. Sorry. The coworker chuckled awkwardly. They claimed not to know the source of the rumor. Was Jane the one who let it slip? No, it couldn't be her. Jane is extremely discreet. The only explanation was that Mike's affair was so blatant it had become common knowledge. If he liked the other woman enough to flaunt their relationship, it would naturally lead to rumors. Either way, this is the worst. It's humiliating. Being seen as the woman whose husband might be cheating at work was unbearable. Even my tactless boss once asked me outright, "What does it feel like to have a husband who cheats on you?" The question filled me with intense discomfort. I couldn't take it anymore. One evening, I confronted Mike as soon as he got home. Mike, are you cheating on me? Just tell me the truth. There are these awful rumors going around, and it's humiliating for me. I don't know anything about those rumors. Why would I cheat? That's ridiculous. Ridiculous, really. There's nothing suspicious at all. Trust me. Besides, do you even have any proof that I'm cheating? If I had asked Jane, she could have easily gathered proof of Mike's affair. Something so solid and undeniable that Mike wouldn't be able to make any excuses. But I didn't ask her. Deep down, I think I still wanted to believe in him. Even if he really was cheating, I told myself it might just be a fleeting mistake. Eventually, he'd realize his wrongs and come back to me. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case. The ugly rumors surrounding Mike only continued to grow. Then, one evening, I came home after being away on a rare business trip. I immediately felt something was off. The air in the room was different. There was a faint but sweet floral fragrance I didn't recognize. Something about it set off alarm bells. I started looking around the house, feeling increasingly uneasy. When I got to the bedroom, I found something even more shocking. The cosmetics I always used were in a completely different place than where I usually kept them. Hey, Mike, did you let someone into the house while I was away? What? Of course not. Why would you think that? The room was filled with that strange perfume-like scent. Items I used daily had been moved. There was so much to suspect. Just be honest, I demanded. But Mike pretended not to know anything. He laughed it off, saying he had probably just moved things while cleaning. You've been away on a trip, it's rare for you, so you're probably just tired, he said. I am tired. But Mike, are you sure? You're not cheating. I can believe you, right? Tell me clearly. I'm not cheating. Don't let those weird rumors get to you. Trust me. We're a married couple, aren't we? Mike smiled at me gently, but I trusted Jane too. Jane wouldn't feed me unverified information. If Jane thought something was suspicious, then Mike was genuinely suspicious, which meant Mike, with that kind smile, was lying to me right now. The fear of Mike's betrayal loomed large in my mind, and I couldn't fall asleep that night. One night, Mike came home late, completely drunk. He walked into the living room and collapsed onto the sofa. Hey, at least take off your suit. And do you even know what time it is? Where have you been this late? Shut up. What does it matter where I am or who I'm with? It's none of your business. What? How can you say that? Of course, it's my business. I'm your partner, aren't I? In his drunken state, Mike clearly couldn't think straight. He couldn't come up with a proper argument and just sat there in annoyed silence. The atmosphere in the house was unbearable. How did things come to this? You're suspicious of me, aren't you? You think I'm cheating. Just admit it. Yeah, I am. I hate feeling this way, but I can't help it. I already told you I'm not cheating. And even if I was, it'd be your fault. You're the one who fails to make me happy as a wife. Drunk people often spout nonsensical logic. If a wife doesn't keep her husband entertained, then it's natural for him to cheat. Was this Mike's true feeling, slipping out because of the alcohol? If so, it was the worst thing he could have said. After throwing more harsh words my way, Mike fell asleep on the sofa. That night, I lay in bed alone, reflecting on our marriage, silently crying. At this point, for reasons I couldn't ignore, my love for Mike had vanished completely. All I could feel was anger and frustration. It was heartbreaking. If I stayed in this state of mind, I knew I'd eventually break down completely. I think Jane understood my pain. She suggested we take a trip overseas. Let's forget about all these troubles. Let's have some fun abroad and clear our minds. Grateful for my best friend's support, I decided to go. You're going on a trip with Jane. Fine, do whatever you want. I've got a business trip coming up anyway. I didn't even bother asking where Mike's business trip was. Honestly, I just didn't care anymore. Now that my heart had distanced itself from him, I couldn't bring myself to feel the slightest interest in what he was doing or where he was going. I was exhausted both from work and emotionally. I needed to recharge. So I pulled out my large rolling suitcase for the first time in ages and started packing what I'd need for the trip. On the morning of the trip, I woke up feeling refreshed for the first time in a long while. How long had it been since Jane and I last went on an overseas trip together? I was in high spirits, but that mood quickly plummeted once we boarded the plane. A couple sitting next to me began flirting openly in the middle of the day. Let's have some fun at the hotel tonight. You don't expect to get any sleep. What a cliché, crude, and shameless exchange. Who were these two, excitedly talking like this? Middle schoolers, high schoolers. I glanced over at them and froze. The man, dressed in flashy clothes and looking every bit like someone on vacation, had a face I recognized all too well. It was undeniably my husband, Mike, the same Mike who was supposedly away on a business trip. Wait, is that Mike? Jane tilted her head in confusion. Mike turned to look at us, clearly startled. The moment he realized it was me sitting next to him, his face turned pale. He began trembling under our piercing glares. After all, He'd just been caught red-handed, and not just by me, but also by Jane, the last person Mike would want to face in this situation. Why? Because. So you've been betraying Kate, haven't you? My dear friend, I'm telling my father about this. Please, no, Jane, you've got it all wrong. I would never betray Kate. Please don't tell the president. Yes, Jane's father was the president of the trading company where Mike worked. Jane was the one person Mike absolutely couldn't afford to make an enemy of. If his betrayal of me came to light, he'd also lose Jane's trust. Mike should have known better, and yet, here he was, caught in the act of cheating. Was it for the thrill? Or had he fallen so deeply for Anne that he couldn't stop himself? Regardless, this was the end of our marriage. As soon as I got back, I would file for divorce. Please, just hear me out. I understand how this looks, but it's not what you think. I swear it's not an affair. Right, Anne? Yay. It's not an affair. What was it again? What do you mean? What was it again? We're business associates, remember. Kate, this is Anne, a representative from one of my clients. Anne, right, the woman whose name has been linked to you in all those rumors. I don't know anything about those rumors. It's purely a professional relationship. Throughout the flight, Mike kept repeating this excuse. Jane sat next to me, visibly exasperated, knowing full well that he was lying. I also couldn't bear to listen to his pitiful excuses anymore, so I asked him to stop. I don't want to hear anything right now. Save it for when we land at the airport. I'm sorry, Jane, I apologize to you as well. This isn't about forgiving or not forgiving you, at least not right now. There's too little information to make a judgment, but once we land, I'll be confirming everything with my dad and the company. I'll also be asking about the details of this so-called business trip. Yes, there was no doubt in my mind that the business trip was a lie. It would only take a quick inquiry from Jane to uncover the truth. Meanwhile, Mike was undoubtedly scrambling to come up with an excuse. He might even be trying to get a coworker to cover for him, or setting up a hasty story with Anne. But honestly, none of it mattered to me anymore. I let go of my thoughts and closed my eyes, surrendering to the relative peace of the flight. When we arrived at the destination airport, the four of us found a nearby cafe and sat down. Anne kept her gaze down and remained silent, while Mike looked visibly tense. His expression said it all. He was terrified of the upcoming interrogation and likely wished he could flee. We've confirmed with the company. To be blunt, Mike, this business trip is a lie, isn't it? You apparently took paid leave instead. Well, yes, it's true that this wasn't an official business trip. It was more of a personal initiative, a sort of, let's call it a workshop. A personal initiative, a workshop. I've never heard of anything like that. Could you explain it more clearly? Because right now, I have no idea what you're trying to say. Mike's excuses were laughably weak. He claimed he had come to learn about foreign sales techniques to improve himself as a salesperson. Since the purpose wasn't entirely formal, the company likely wouldn't approve the expenses, so he had applied for paid leave from the beginning. What's the name of the company you plan to visit? Who's the point of contact? Did you arrange for a translator? I'd like some specifics. Well, I'm sorry, I can't tell you. It's confidential. Confidential? I'm technically an outsider, yes, but I'm also your partner. You can't even share the name of the company with me. Don't you think that's suspicious? It's just how the other party operates. They're very strict about privacy. Mike let out a nervous chuckle. I couldn't for the life of me understand what he found amusing in this situation. Jane sat next to me, visibly exasperated, her face clearly saying she'd had enough. So you're claiming this isn't a trip for an affair? I swear, it's not. I absolutely promise. This is not an affair. Then what about those vulgar comments you made on the plane? Talking about enjoying the hotel and not letting her sleep tonight. That's not how normal business partners talk, is it? It's not what it sounded like. It was about work. We meant staying up all night to study the local sales techniques diligently. Next to Anne, Mike nodded vigorously in agreement. So, does it mean you're staying at the same hotel? I asked. Mike and Anne shook their heads in unison. No, no, they said. Then tell me where you're staying, I demanded. Again, they both shook their heads. Apparently, that was also a secret. Well, I actually haven't decided where I'm staying yet, Mike stammered. I was planning to look for a place after this. That's the truth, I swear. Please believe me. I'm staying at a hotel, Anne said, but it's one run by a friend of mine. It's sort of a hideaway. And I've been told not to disclose the location or the name. Once again, the important details were a mystery. What exactly was I supposed to believe? I was reaching my limit physically, mentally, and emotionally. At the same time, my anger toward Mike was boiling over. Enough already. Just tell the truth. This is nothing but a trip for an affair, isn't it? How many times do I have to say it? It's not. I've explained this to you already. You call this an explanation. Everything important is a secret. The company is a secret. The hotel is a secret. How can you possibly expect me to trust you? Well, Mike looked troubled, glancing at Anne, as if searching for an excuse. At this point, I decided to bring up all the other grievances I'd kept bottled up until now. Those expensive designer clothes, bags, and accessories you bought with your credit card. Those were all gifts for Anne, weren't they? What? Why are you bringing that up now? That has nothing to do with this. Of course, it has everything to do with this. I'm accusing you of having an affair with Anne. And honestly, I'm nearly certain I'm right. Just look at her outfit. Anne was decked out in nothing but the designer items Mike had purchased. I knew them well, having thoroughly looked into the names and appearances of each product. Anne denied it, claiming she bought everything herself. But I didn't believe her. When I asked who the gifts were for if not Anne, Mike said that, too, was a secret. Everything inconvenient for you is a secret. How am I supposed to believe anything you say? Just admit it already. This is an affair trip. Plain and simple. Kate, please. You have to believe me. We're married, aren't we? Surely, we can work through this together. Even if we're married. It's impossible if you don't even have an honest conversation. How can I trust you when you are not being truthful about anything? I'm asking you to trust me, even just this once. I promise you'll never have to doubt me again. Never. Mike kept apologizing over and over, desperately trying to get me to forgive him. The same conversation kept repeating, and I was honestly fed up. This trip, which should have been something special, was ruined. I felt like I was being interfered with. I had to somehow make Mike understand that the only option left was divorce. Let's get a divorce. There's no other choice. If you understand that we're cutting ties, you can at least be honest about everything, right? Divorce? No, I don't want that. I never planned on getting divorced. Well, I have. I've had enough of you, too many secrets, too much waste. You've done nothing to improve our marriage. Don't you think we can't live like this anymore? I'll change. I'll turn over a new leaf. Please, don't say you want a divorce. Mike was almost in tears, looking pitiful. Seeing that, even Anne seemed to have drawn back a little. I turned my gaze toward her. I could tell she was nervous. Where do you work, Anne? Oh well. It's not a big company or anything. I just want to know the name of your company. It's not like you can't say it, right? Is there something you don't want me to know? No, it's nothing like that. I work at a small trading company, and the name is. Anne said the company's name, and Jane nodded. It seemed to match what she had researched earlier. If Anne lied now, it would be easy to find out the truth. It seemed Anne knew enough to realize that. Anne, please tell me the truth. I'm honestly so fed up with Mike. This isn't a fair trip, right? Just admit it, please. Be honest with me. No, that's not it. It's really not. There's been gossip about Mike's affair going around for a long time, and it's making me so embarrassed. It's really a nuisance. Wait, really? I was sure Anne was the one involved. After I pressed her again and again, Anne finally started to speak. She bit her lip, lowered her head, and apologized. I had an affair with Mike, Anne. But please believe me on this. I didn't know Mike was actually married until I met him on the plane. I only went along with the conversation in the air. So you were dating him thinking he was single. What a convenient lie. I can't believe this. Jane, who had been silent until then, laughed. It was clear that Anne was lying. Jane, who had used her connections to investigate before, knew. She knew that Anne had continued her relationship with Mike even after finding out he was married. In fact, there was evidence of it. Jane took out her smartphone. You can't lie your way out of this. I did some research on you before, too. When I was looking into Mike's affair, I looked into you at the same time. You investigated my affair. Jane, why? Why? Because Kate was really hurting, and I couldn't just stand by as a friend. So I had someone investigate. On Jane's smartphone was a covert photo. It showed Mike and Anne leaving a hotel together, looking very friendly. They were acting like they had nothing to hide. How bold! Did they really think they could get away with cheating so openly, without anyone noticing? This was why I decided to go on an overseas trip with Jane. This clear proof of infidelity. Since then, I had wanted a divorce as soon as possible. This alone is enough to be conclusive evidence. But there's more. There's also an audio recording. Do you want to listen to it now? Wait, an audio recording. Hold on. You mean you had someone get close without us noticing and record our conversation? Exactly. The person I hired did a great job. You can clearly hear both of you talking. Jane played the recording. I already knew the contents of the conversation. Anne had been urging Mike to get divorced quickly. She said he should dump that woman and switch to her. In other words, Anne had known from the beginning that Mike was married. Her claim that she didn't know until they met on the plane was a lie. As I glared at Anne, she started to tremble. You two, a lying man and a lying woman. You're really a perfect couple. As you wished, I'll divorce Mike. And if you want to marry him afterward, feel free. Wait, let's talk this through. What's there to talk about now? Mike, you know how close Kate and I are, right? I will make sure you regret hurting my best friend. And of course, I'll tell Dad about all of this. Please don't do that. You know how Dad feels about infidelity and that kind of thing, right? If he finds out, I'll be fired. Jane nodded. It was true. Jane's father was known for his strict sense of integrity. He hated infidelity and any kind of betrayal in relationships. Apparently, he had once fired an executive who had an affair with a subordinate. Please, forgive me this time. Let me try again, please. Jane, please, forgive me too, Mike said with a trembling voice. It seemed he was terrified of being fired. His face looked weaker than I had ever seen before. Don't say something so stupid. After all these lies, you want me to forgive you now? That's way too convenient for you, I said coldly. My words seemed to push Mike even further into despair. He was shocked. Tears were welling up in his eyes. There's been a lot of pressure from work, and I was really tired. I just needed a break. And then I ended up with N. Sorry, but I don't want to hear any excuses anymore. When we get back, you'll sign the divorce papers immediately. I'm really sorry, I swear. I just thought it would be a little fling. Mike kept insisting how sorry he was. The way he struggled to speak was pathetic, but now his attitude only irritated me. Why had I wasted my time on such a man all this time? And on top of that, to say it was just a little fling, when the person he had an affair with was sitting right next to him. Anne's face turned bright red, likely from anger. This relationship between them would probably end right here. Mike, I can't trust you anymore. There's no way I could ever trust you again. The divorce is final, and I'm also going to ask for compensation. Anne, this applies to you as well. Yes. Afterward, Anne said she would cancel the trip and go home. She was disillusioned with Mike and no longer wanted to spend any more time with him. Mike tried to stop her, but I'm sure it didn't matter to her anymore. Jane and I left the cafe, leaving the two of them behind. We wanted to forget everything and just have fun. It was about half a month later when my divorce from Mike was finalized. It had taken much longer than expected, mainly because Mike had been reluctant to sign the papers. There had been times when I thought I was happy, but when I looked back, those memories were few and far between. My marriage to Mike had been full of lies and betrayal, and by the end, my days had been filled with nothing but sighs. About 6 months later, Jane came to my new apartment with a smile on her face. Mike finally quit his job. He seemed like he couldn't let go for a while, but it couldn't be helped. After all, he made an enemy of the top people at the company. Jane is truly a reliable friend. After the trip, Jane told her father everything. She explained how Mike had betrayed me, his partner, and made me suffer. Jane's father, who also had a past of being betrayed by a partner, absolutely does not tolerate infidelity. After hearing the story from Jane, he called Mike into his office and thoroughly scolded him. He was so angry, Dad said, someone who betrays their partner will eventually betray their colleagues, so they can't be trusted. And he looked really scary when he said it. I can totally imagine Mike's tearful face from that moment. Do you know what happened to him after he quit his job? He seems to have completely lost his confidence. I heard he's just wandering around without a job, living off his savings while drinking all the time. He still has to pay compensation and a lot of loans. I wonder if he's okay. After that, I happened to see Mike in the city. He looked very different, thinner, and dressed in shabby clothes. He seemed unable to recover from the setback, probably because his life had been too smooth before. He hadn't found a new job and was just drinking while living off his savings. His hair was messy, his face was pale, and he looked like someone I really didn't want to talk to. It was clear he was living each day cursing his past self. By the way, I wonder what happened to Anne. I haven't heard anything about her since then. Anne seems to be in a tough spot too. I heard that her affair with Mike became known in the company, and people have been saying a lot of harsh things to her. She's been getting really cold stares, and it's been really hard for her. I bet she's struggling financially too. I made sure to ask for the same amount of compensation from Anne as I did from Mike. She probably can't buy the brands she loves so easily anymore. She must have had to give up many of her belongings to pay the compensation. Infidelity is something that's unforgivable for many people. Anne will continue to carry that responsibility. I hope she'll live the rest of her life regretting the mistake she made. After that, I spent some time focusing on myself. I learned new things, met with friends, and enjoyed my newfound freedom. I worked hard too. Having gone through those difficult days, I could feel how much I had grown as a person. One day, while I was at a cafe with Jane, she made a suggestion. A friend from school invited me to a party. Do you want to go too? Is it okay if I have a divorce in my past? It's fine. The friend who invited me has been divorced too. There's no problem. Then I replied, if that's the case, I'd love to go. I have no intention of saying that I would never marry again. I really love spending happy times with someone. I want to look ahead, not back, and pursue happiness. I'm ready to meet someone wonderful in the future and greet them with a sincere smile. Life is just beginning, and that's what I believe. I'm determined to live strong from here on out.
Why? Why does Betty have to go through this alone? If this is what life had in store for her, it would have been better if she was never born. My mom, Gianna, crumpled to the floor beside me, screaming. Betty. My beloved only daughter. Just as my mom said, what purpose did Betty have for coming into this world? For such a short life filled with so much suffering. Where is God in all this? Or is this supposed to be some kind of test from above? Even though I wanted to cry, to scream, my emotions were frozen in place. Right after starting elementary school, during spring break, Betty was involved in an accident on her way to class that robbed her of all the joys in life. She can't laugh, can't speak, can't walk, can't run. She's been in a vegetative state for 7 years now. Just lying there in that hospital bed, eyes and mouth barely open. But still, I never stopped believing that someday, Mom, Betty would open her eyes and say. However, at 14 years old, an even greater tragedy befell Betty. Somehow, she became pregnant. A 14-year-old child who can't move or communicate. Who? Who could do something so cruel? As I listened to the doctor's explanation, about to lose myself in rage, Odell, who had been trembling with clenched fists beside me, finally spoke. We don't need a DNA test. I don't even want to know who did this. He said it calmly but clearly, and stood up. Why would he say something like that? He took my hand and silently left the room, returning to Betty's hospital room. And there, he uttered the unbelievable. With a faint smile on his face. I'm Elena, 38 years old. It's just me, my husband Odell, and our daughter Betty. Odell is a year older than me. We started dating in college and got married about a year after graduation. There was a reason for our early marriage. I had quit my first job after only half a year. The long hours and interpersonal issues at work had taken their toll, leading to a mental breakdown. This initial stumble in my career cast a dark shadow over my future prospects. I was terrified to start job hunting again. Maybe I'm just not cut out for society. I might never be able to hold down a job again. Elena, there's no way you're not fit for society. You managed to keep a part-time job all through college, didn't you? This company just wasn't the right fit for you, that's all. Even when I started becoming a shut-in, he never stopped asking me out on dates. Back then, our dates often involved driving around or spending time in nature. I was touched by how considerate Odell was being. One day, while we were out on a drive to the beach, it happened. If you're so scared of finding a job that you'd rather hole up at home, why not marry me instead? I looked Odell in the eyes, taken aback by the sudden proposal, and the next moment I burst out laughing. Stop it! Don't joke around like that out of the blue. I could only hide my blushing face, equal parts embarrassed and elated, with laughter. Would you be mad if I said I was serious? I've known since college that if I ever got married, it could only be to you, Elena. Rather than wasting away as a recluse, I think it wouldn't be so bad to get married and try changing your environment. Odell's kindness brought tears to my eyes. Take your time to think it over. I was planning to propose to you sooner or later anyway. Even as I started to mentally stabilize, back then I was still too scared to leave the house. I knew I had to do something, but I hated feeling so helpless. In that darkness, Odell showed me a glimmer of hope. We registered our marriage and started living together soon after. Odell found us a place close to my parents' home. I'll protect you for the rest of our lives, Elena. My worried parents eventually accepted our marriage and started supporting us. I think Odell's sincerity and seriousness got through to them. His parents didn't object to our marriage either. My in-laws live in the countryside, over a 3-hour drive away, and they seem to assume Odell won't be moving back. Don't worry about us. Just come visit every once in a while and we'll be happy. My sister-in-law Rosetta had also gotten married a few years prior and was enjoying life as a couple. For an anxious person like me, I was grateful for this distance from my in-laws. Just as Odell said, married life drastically changed my circumstances. As I became a housewife and took on household chores, Odell thanked me every single day. Thanks for everything, as always. Your cooking is so good, Elena, I can't help but eat too much. Really? There are seconds, so eat as much as you want. I'm so lucky to be married to you, Elena. Even someone like me could be useful to Odell. Those small realizations, bit by bit, helped me regain my confidence. Then, something I never could have predicted happened. About half a year into our marriage, I found out I was pregnant. To me, pregnancy was nothing but terrifying. Could I really raise a child when I was still dealing with my anxieties about being a part of society? I decided to be honest with Odell about how I felt. I'm thrilled that this child chose to come to us. Odell's words made me realize something important. That's right, this baby chose me. I hadn't thought about it that way. You know, I was born when my mom was 39, so when I was a kid, I always admired how young my parents were. I'm so happy that I get to be that kind of dad now. It seems my in-laws had married late in life, as they were both in their 60s when we visited to inform them of our marriage. Young dad and mom. Seeing the joy on Odell's face, I gradually started to feel happy too. You're right. This child chose to come to us. We should be celebrating. I suddenly felt embarrassed about how I had been so anxious and self-absorbed. Odell was incredibly supportive throughout my pregnancy, and I felt truly blessed to have married him. Our baby was a girl. Our daughter, crying out heartily as she entered the world, was nothing short of our little angel. I will never forget the emotion I felt when I first held her. The weight of my tiny daughter in my arms was more than enough to make me realize the immense weight of this new life. Thank you for being born to your mama and daddy. I promise I'll always protect you, no matter what. I found myself naturally talking to my newborn girl. I think it was my vow as a mother. Our daughter, whom we named Betty, grew up healthy and strong. Even as Odell and I fumbled through the unfamiliar challenges of parenthood, every day was filled with laughter. Going for checkups, taking her to the park for the first time, visiting my in-laws. Raising Betty made me stronger. Then, when Betty turned 3, I started working the lunch shift at a nearby cafe. It had been 5 years since that crushing setback with my first job. I was finally free from that long period of suffering. That dreadful phone call came not long after Betty started elementary school, just as spring break was ending. Please try to stay calm as you listen. Your daughter has been in a serious accident and is in critical condition. I don't remember how I responded, but as soon as I hung up, I contacted Odell and rushed to the hospital where Betty had been taken. The pounding of my heart in my ears only intensified my anxiety. Dear God, please save Betty. When we arrived at the hospital, Betty was in the middle of emergency surgery. Odell, who had gotten there after me, found me sitting on the floor with my head in my hands and pulled me into his arms. It'll be okay. Betty is going to be just fine. It sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as he was trying to reassure me. For what felt like an eternity, all Odell and I could do was wait silently in that waiting room for Betty's surgery to end. Finally, the surgery in progress light went out and the doctor emerged. Betty had narrowly escaped death but remained unconscious, her condition still critical. She's alive! In that moment, that was all that mattered, and I thanked God for it. As Odell supported my sobbing frame. Thank goodness. Oh, thank goodness. He too repeated over and over. In that moment, I truly believed those words. According to the police, the man responsible for the accident was in his 20s and worked at a restaurant. He had been drinking there until the early morning. Driving while intoxicated, he sped right into a group of elementary school students on their way to class. In his hurry to get back home, he had taken a back street through a residential area. The man claimed he didn't know it was a school route at that hour. Luckily, the other children got away with just superficial injuries, but even that fact weighed heavily on my heart. Why? Why did this have to happen only to Betty? Faced with the painful reality before me, I couldn't help but let those words slip out. It had been several days since the surgery, and Betty still hadn't regained consciousness. Her vacant eyes stared up at the ceiling, just as they did every day. Betty was in a vegetative state. Still, we were grateful that she was alive. Though there were times when we couldn't help but cry, having Betty there with us was what mattered most. Good morning, Betty. It's so warm outside today. Betty, listen. Mommy messed up at work. I talked to her over and over again, every single day. I believed that somehow my voice was reaching her. I'm home, Betty. I bought a new picture book to read with you. Odell always stopped by the hospital on his way home from work, treasuring his time with her. Both Odell and I could feel the connection we had with Betty, even as she continued to stare at the ceiling. See, Betty thinks this book is interesting too. Really? Then Mommy will read it to you tomorrow. When the three of us were together, Betty's expression seemed to soften the most. We believed it wasn't just our imagination. A few months later, the perpetrator was found guilty and ordered to pay a large sum in damages. The figure had more digits than I had ever seen, but it wasn't equivalent to Betty's life. If that money could have brought her back to the way she was, we would have given it all up in a heartbeat. A year passed since the accident. Betty's classmates moved on to second grade. I think it was around this time that Odell started acting strange. Sorry, I have to work late today, so I don't think I'll be able to stop by the hospital. He had been visiting every single day, but then it became every other day, then every 2 days. Slowly but surely, Odell's visits to the hospital became less and less frequent. Hey, can't you come see Betty for even just 10 minutes? She seems lonely in the evenings since you haven't been around. I know. Work is just really busy. I'm sorry. Despite my repeated pleas, he was only showing up about 3 times a month now. And on the days he didn't visit, he would come home drunk every single night. Exhausted from visiting my parents, working part-time, and going to the hospital, I grew increasingly irritated with Odell's drinking. My stress just kept building. Then one day, a drunken Odell dropped a glass of water on the floor, shattering it. The moment that sound rang out, something inside me snapped too. If this is what our life is going to be like, then just divorce me already. Odell looked as if he had realized something. I can't take any more heartache outside of what's happening with Betty. If you're not willing to work with me, then just file for divorce and leave right now. As I spoke, tears streamed down my cheeks. I'm sorry. That's not it. It's not like that. It's just so painful when I think about Betty. Odell continued with a serious expression, as if he had sobered up completely. The thought that she might be like this forever, it feels like my heart is being ripped apart. I'm sorry. I was using alcohol to avoid dealing with it. Why? Then how am I supposed to cope with this pain? If I run away, who's going to take care of her? We were both utterly exhausted. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That night, we held each other and cried. The year we spent waiting, hoping that Betty would regain consciousness someday, had a certain weight to it. It felt like a turning point. And that's exactly why there were moments when it seemed like there was no end in sight, and it became unbearable. I can't even imagine leaving you and Betty. I'm sorry. I'll be a better father and a better husband. I knew Odell was suffering too, and hearing him put it into words helped ease my anger a little. I felt like I could try believing in him one more time. I had no idea that a terrible betrayal from Odell was waiting for me just around the corner. For years after the accident, Betty turned 11. That year, Odell got a rare call from his parents' house. It seems my sis got divorced and moved back home. She lost custody of her son too. According to my mother-in-law Matilda, my sister-in-law Rosetta's embezzlement of the family's money had come to light, leading to the divorce. She lost custody and was being asked to pay child support and return the money she had taken. I've been asked to help take care of her until she can find a job. Is that okay? I guess it can't be helped if it's just until she finds work. But why would Rosetta embezzle money from her own family? Since we lived so far apart, I had only met Rosetta a few times. She seemed like a plain, unremarkable person, if anything. Apparently, she was trying to show off and kept treating her friends to expensive meals. It went on for years. She didn't seem like the type to do something like that. But with everything going on with Betty, we don't have much room to help out financially. Yeah. I'll do what I can within my salary. Don't worry, Elena. Okay. Actually, aside from my part-time wages, Odell managed all of our finances. When we first got married, I was mentally unstable and a housewife, and Odell was really on top of things like that. He took care of all the hospital paperwork and payments for Betty, so I trusted him completely. But around this time, Odell started skipping more and more of his hospital visits again. Betty. Daddy got promoted to assistant manager. I might have to cut back on my visits for a while, but I'm going to work hard for you and Mommy. One day, Odell came to the hospital after work and reported this while stroking Betty's hair. What? That's amazing. Did you hear that, Betty? Your daddy is incredible. Betty's eyes remained fixed on the ceiling as always, but her face seemed to be smiling. Thanks. But I'll probably be getting home later from now on, and I think I'll have more business trips too. I'm sorry if it makes you two feel lonely. Because Odell had taken the time to explain it to Betty as well, I didn't feel the same unease as before. The three of us as a family could keep going strong. Or so I thought. Around 2 years after Odell's work got really busy and he stopped coming to the hospital, I was approached by a hospital clerk. You haven't paid this month's hospital fees yet, have you? I thought about contacting Odell, but he was away on a business trip to New Orleans until the day after tomorrow. The hospital only accepted cash payments, so I decided to check our bank account and figure something out on my own for the time being. I quickly found the transaction records for Odell's and my accounts, but I couldn't locate the statement for the account where the compensation money was kept. After searching the whole house, I finally found that statement in a drawer of Odell's desk. I casually checked its contents and was stunned by the balance shown there. The compensation money, which had been such a large sum, was now less than half of what it was. Even considering Betty's high hospitalization costs, the rate at which it was decreasing was far too strange. I immediately called Odell. "Hey, you know that money we had for Betty? It's less than half of what it was. What in the world did you spend it on?" My heart was pounding rapidly. If this money ran out and we couldn't pay the hospital bills anymore, Odell's and my salaries alone wouldn't be enough to cover it. After a moment of silence, Odell finally spoke. "I told you before that I'd be sending money to my parents' place, right? And now that I'm an assistant manager, I have more social obligations that cost money. It can't be helped, can it?" "You're still sending money to your parents? Hasn't Rosetta found a job yet? And didn't you promise you'd send money from your own salary?" So for the past 2 years, Odell had been continuing to send money to his parents? That money was paid up for Betty's sake. If it's gone, we won't be able to get by on just what we earn. Oh, shut up. There's still plenty left, it'll be fine. And it's not like we know how much longer Betty will even live anyway. What? I was shocked by Odell's words. Did he think Betty wouldn't just wake up, but that she wouldn't survive? Seeing me go silent, he seemed to realize he had said too much and sounded flustered. "My salary has gone up too, so don't worry, it'll be okay. Anyway, I have to get back to work, so I'll talk to you later." With that, he hung up. It was the moment when my doubts about Odell began to sprout. I left the house with the passbook and cash card in hand, paid the hospital fees, and headed to my parents' house. To protect Betty's money, I had decided to leave the card with my mother. When I told Odell about the card after he got back from his trip, his face turned bright red and he flew into a rage. He knocked over the furniture in the living room and swept everything off the shelves. I had never seen Odell so enraged before. "I need a distraction too, you know. For the past 7 years, thinking about Betty not recovering has made me feel like I'm falling apart. It's terrifying," he screamed as he threw things on the floor left and right. He was like a child throwing a tantrum because he couldn't get his way. "What's so wrong with me spending money to take my mind off things? That money was supposed to include compensation for the family too, wasn't it? Is family just you? Have you ever considered my feelings? I've said this before, haven't I? When do I get to take a break? Stop only saying things that are convenient for you." Without waiting for Odell's reply, I stated clearly, "I'll be managing Betty's money from now on. Got it?" Odell, who had been silently glaring at me with clenched fists, let out a breath as if the energy had drained out of him. "Oh, is that so? Fine then, I won't put a single cent into this house anymore. I'll send money to my parents and go out drinking with my cash. So don't you dare complain." Leaving those words behind, he stormed out of the house. From that day on, Odell truly stopped coming home. Unable to make ends meet with just my part-time wages, I consulted my parents and decided to move back in with them. "It's okay. We'll support you and Betty." "That's right. You've been trying too hard on your own." It wasn't until I reached this age that I realized just how reassuring a parent's love could be. Are you going to clear out the house? If you're getting a divorce, I'll find a lawyer for you. Thanks. But let me think about it a little more. There was something suspicious about Odell. Still, I wanted to avoid Betty waking up to find the home she remembered gone. That's why, even though neither Odell nor I were going back, we kept paying the rent. I still believed that someday, Mom, Betty would open her eyes and say that Odell would go back to being Betty's kind, loving daddy. Nearly 7 years had passed since the accident. Betty turned 14. Even without consciousness, her body continued to grow. The small frame that had belonged to a first grader stretched out, slowly transforming from a little girl to a young woman. Hey, Betty. If things had stayed the same, you'd be a middle school student in uniform by now. Would you have had your first crush? Or maybe you'd be going through a rebellious phase. As I spoke to Betty, I suddenly found myself unable to stop the tears. It had been 6 months. Odell hasn't visited her even once. Where did the gentleman who adored his daughter go? I felt like I was being crushed by an overwhelming anxiety. It happened one day when I went to the hospital after finishing my part-time job. As I lifted the hem of Betty's pajamas to wipe her body like usual, I felt that something was off. Betty's lower abdomen seemed to be bulging. With the nutrition being delivered through a tube in her stomach, Betty's thinness was pronounced when her pajamas were lifted. Because she was so skinny, the bulge in her lower abdomen bothered me immensely. She couldn't have gotten sick, could she? Worried, I immediately called for a nurse. After I explained the situation, the nurse quickly fetched the attending physician, but the test results were beyond anything I could have imagined. I called Odell right away. Please! Come to the hospital right now. Betty is... What's wrong with Betty? Betty is pregnant. There's a baby in her belly. As I broke down in sobs, unable to hold back. Got it. I'll be right there, just wait for me, Odell gently said. When it came to Betty, Odell would still rush over after all. No matter what, he was still her father. Thinking that, I could feel my heart calming down a little. Waiting for Odell to arrive, we listened to what the attending physician had to say. Is my daughter really pregnant? Yes. Unfortunately, there is no mistake. The ultrasound image the doctor showed us clearly depicted what appeared to be a fetus. Judging by the growth of the fetus, it seems the window for abortion has passed, but considering your daughter's condition, giving birth will be difficult. Abortion. Yes. However, even if we were to perform an abortion on your daughter, you would need to be prepared for considerable risks. The attending physician delivered the news with a grave expression. I felt like everything had gone pitch black before my eyes. Who? Who could do something so cruel? Even covering my eyes with my hands, tears of anger and sorrow welled up. My daughter can't move or express her will. There's no way she could have a child of her own volition. The hospital staff should know that better than anyone, shouldn't they? The attending physician sealed his lips and fell silent. Unlike me, Odell's resolute attitude as he pressed the doctor made me feel reassured. I was truly glad to have him by my side. The only explanation is that my daughter was raped. This happened inside the hospital, right? Don't you dare say it has nothing to do with you. How does the hospital intend to take responsibility for this? I thought all I could do was cry, but the anger welled up at Odell's mention of rape and I stood up. Why? Why does Betty have to go through something so horrible? I can't forgive the culprit. Do a DNA test or whatever it takes, just find the perpetrator no matter what. As I pleaded through my tears, Odell embraced me and slowly sat me back down in the chair. Naturally, we will be reporting this to the police. Is that all right with you? Of course. I will report this to my superiors and we will handle the response going forward. The attending physician spouted the usual words of apology, even as he seemed shaken. When the conversation ended, Odell's fists were trembling with rage as I sat there in a daze. The hospital better show some sincere remorse. And, glaring at the attending physician, Odell said something unexpected. We don't need a DNA test. I don't even want to know who did it. Quietly but clearly, Odell declared this and stood up. We left the doctor's office in silence and returned to Betty's hospital room. Even as I felt reassured by Odell's presence, I couldn't stop thinking about his final words. As soon as the hospital room door closed, Odell uttered something unbelievable. Looks like we'll be getting more money coming in now. What? You know, the compensation money from the accident was running low, right? Now you can rest easy with this, can't you? Odell had a faint smile playing on his lips. You're managing the passbook we have now, right? So this time, I'll manage the money that comes in from the hospital. Otherwise, it wouldn't be fair. I couldn't comprehend what Odell was saying. What are you talking about? Did you not hear the explanation earlier? Betty could die. And you're bringing up money at a time like this? It'll be fine. Betty's body has gotten bigger too. I'm sure she can handle the surgery. Odell hadn't even seen Betty's body in years. Surviving on the bare minimum nutrition, Betty had no physical strength left. Hadn't the attending physician said there was a 50-50 chance of our daughter surviving even with the abortion? And what was that you said earlier? You don't care if they catch the culprit? After what Betty's been put through? Odell's face contorted for a moment. Of course I don't want to know. If I saw that bastard's face, I don't know what I'd do. I don't want to feel any more pain over this. I can't take it anymore. He doesn't want to feel pain? He can't take it? Betty is the one actually going through it right now. Because he can't handle it, the victim, Betty, has to endure it? Unforgivable. Just as I was about to lash out at him, Odell's phone rang. Oh, hang on a sec. Odell whispered to me. It's from work. And left the room. I instinctively knew it was a woman. The moment he put the phone to his ear, I saw Odell's expression soften. I could hear Odell's voice talking in the hallway. Oh, it's fine. Yeah. Want to go on a trip sometime? Looks like some money will be coming in. Yeah. I'll come home early today. He was having an affair. I was certain of it. Was he spending the missing money on that woman? Or was he planning to from now on? If that was true, I couldn't forgive him. Sorry. Well, I better get back to work. Saying that, Odell left the hospital room without so much as a glance in Betty's direction. I also stepped out for a moment and immediately called my dad back home. On the day of the surgery, my parents rushed to the hospital. You can do it. And they cheered Betty on. Odell came too, but he barely exchanged words with my parents. Sitting there with his head hung low, Odell looked like he might be praying for the surgery to go well, or grieving, but I couldn't bring myself to believe in that image of him anymore. The day before, I had talked to Betty a lot. About how happy I was when she was born, how much I love her, how her smile always saved me, how grateful I was that she chose me to be born to. Betty, I'm so sorry for letting you go through so much pain. I promised to protect you, but I'm truly sorry. Mommy will never forgive the people who hurt you. The surgery went smoothly, But perhaps because her body couldn't handle it, Betty gradually weakened. Even after the surgery, Odell never came to check on her. He was running away. He couldn't face reality. That's probably what he'd say. In less than a month, with me and my parents watching over her, Betty took her last breath.
Why? Why did Betty have to go through this alone? If this was going to happen, it would have been better if she was never born.
Beside me, frozen in shock, my mom collapsed to the floor, screaming. Just as she said, what purpose did Betty have for coming into this world? For such a short life filled with so much suffering. Where is God in all this? Or is this supposed to be some kind of test from above? Even though I wanted to cry, to scream, my emotions were frozen in place. A few days after Betty's funeral, the investigation progressed using the DNA from the aborted fetus, and the culprit was arrested. It was a male nurse who worked at the hospital. I was so frustrated and furious. This was the only time I wailed and screamed at the top of my lungs. I wanted to tear him limb from limb with my own hands. Maybe it was because I felt so strongly that I needed to atone for not being able to protect her. After I had calmed down, I brought up divorce with Odell. We decided to have our final discussion in the house where the three of us had lived together. I thought he would agree readily, but he resisted.
No way. Why do we have to get divorced? Now that Betty's gone, we can finally go back to living a normal life.
I couldn't believe he could say something like that so easily. Let's start over as a family from square one. Betty left us that money thinking about our future. The compensation money is Betty's final gift to us.
What?
It seemed Odell had said something he shouldn't have. The little bit of affection I still had for Odell vanished in an instant. Using Betty's money to start over as a family? For those words to even come out of his mouth, it's the lowest of the low.
I know you've been having an affair. You're living with her now, aren't you? I have proof. What do you plan to do about her?
The day Odell had smirked and said,
Money will be coming in again.
I had asked my dad to hire a detective to investigate him.
That's not it. That's just fooling around. It goes hand in hand with drinking. I was only doing it to distract myself from the unbearable pain. I'll break it off right away. It's not serious. For fooling around, it's been going on for 3 years.
I had your finances looked into as well. Until I took away the passbook, Odell had been sending $2,000 to his parents' house.
Rosetta still isn't working, is she? After everything Betty did for her, did you see how much money your parents sent? $300. $300.
Odell was flustered. He probably thought the details wouldn't be noticed since he was withdrawing in lump sums.
I got a call the other day. They said only $1,000 was transferred this month. That it wasn't enough to cover the child support for Rosetta's kid.
In addition to sending money to his parents, it seems Odell had also been covering the child support and the money Rosetta had been ordered to pay back.
I thought, they're family, so I have to help. Betty's money is the family's money too, so I figured a little bit would be okay.
I let out a deep sigh. He had even rented a room for his mistress. Now he's paying for her living expenses too.
What else could I do? She saved me. She supported me. She was my only escape. When I gave her money, she was happy and relied on me. It's because I had that I was able to face reality.
Odell's excuses infuriated me.
What? You weren't facing anything. You didn't visit Betty because you felt guilty, right? You were running away from her because you were scared to face her, weren't you? But I really did love Betty. That's absolutely not a lie. I know that. Of course that's true. Maybe Odell's heart had already broken sometime during these 7 years. Maybe my heart is broken too. Even so, as her father, I wanted him to stay by her side until the very end.
You're weak and you're a coward. When things got tough, you ran away on your own, and now that she's gone, you think you can go back to your life before? No way, you coward. I will never forgive you.
I. In front of Odell, who hung his head as he cried, I silently placed the divorce papers. And then I left the house where we had been paying rent all this time. Later, after getting a lawyer and talking with Odell again, the divorce was finalized. Odell agreed to deduct the compensation from the divorce trial and the money he had personally embezzled from the division of assets. Of course, I also made sure his mistress had to pay compensation. In the end, it seems Odell paid for his mistress's share as well. I believe my revenge against Odell was accomplished when our divorce was finalized. If Odell had truly faced reality and gone on to start a new life with his mistress, I was ready to forgive him for that. However, as expected, he turned a blind eye to reality. Driven by guilt towards me and Betty, he escaped into alcohol, and the woman apparently got fed up and left. Yes, I knew this would happen. With the money coming in, Odell quit his job and started drowning in booze from morning onward, but living like that, the money would quickly run out. Even so, unable to quit drinking, he eventually couldn't pay rent and had to move back in with his parents. Now he's hospitalized for alcohol addiction treatment, and Rosetta is working to support him. Matilda, my mother-in-law, who called asking for money, told me everything over the phone.
Please, send money for his treatment. You have plenty of money, don't you? You're the only one I have left to turn to.
I was appalled. Even after Betty's death, they were still counting on her money. Odell and Rosetta were probably quite alike in their indecisiveness and desire to please everyone. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but the moment they became unable to think of anyone but themselves, they had already gone astray. Weakness can become strength, but it can also become evil. Matilda, I don't have any money to use for him. He should have to pay for what he's done himself. I've put Betty's money to good use, and there's not a single dollar left. With that, I hung up the phone. After the divorce, I found a job and moved out of my parents' house. I deducted the compensation from Odell and his mistress, and donated all of Betty's remaining compensation to an organization that supports children orphaned by traffic accidents. Even now, I sometimes think about what Mom said in that hospital room. Would it have been better if Betty hadn't been born? I don't think I can say that for certain. That's something for Betty herself to decide, and no one but Betty has the right to declare that she was unhappy. I am so grateful to have met Betty. The time we spent together was irreplaceable, and it taught me so much. With Betty's lessons in my heart, I intend to keep living while acknowledging my own weakness and facing reality head-on. Unfortunately, we don't need someone with a disability. Do your best to live on your own.
What is this?
There was a piece of paper on the table. It was addressed to me. Unlike my sister Chloe, I was born with no control over my legs. It must have been troublesome for them. Then, my smartphone rang. It was a call from my dad.
Hello?
Is that you, Brittany? Did you see the letter?
I saw it, but...
Well, that's how it is. Goodbye.
Wait a minute.
What do you want?
Of course, I have something to say.
What is this letter?
It says exactly what it means.
I'm tired of raising a daughter like you. Don't worry about us. He hung up the phone abruptly. Desperate to figure out what to do, I called my mom next.
Hello, Mom?
From the sound of your voice, I guess you saw the letter. They said I'm a burden because of my disability. They even called me a monster. I see, but you don't have to worry.
What?
Because you are. 8 years have passed since my mom's shocking revelation. One day, my dad showed up at my high-rise condo.
How can someone like you afford to live in a place like this?
Would you like me to tell you? I shared the secret with my dad. He went into a frenzy and started experiencing hell. My name is Brittany, and I'm 26 years old now. I live comfortably on the 55th floor of a high-rise condo. But achieving this lifestyle was no easy feat. I was born with a rare disease that causes my muscles to weaken over time. I still remember one thing my dad said to me. I think it was when I was in kindergarten.
Why were you born this way? Isn't this your fault? What?
Chloe was born without any problems. Chloe is my sister, 2 years older than me. I was listening to my parents' conversation from the living room. My room was next to the living room, so I could hear everything. Even though I was young, I understood that they were complaining about me.
You don't have to say that.
Then you take care of her from now on.
That's not fair.
I'm leaving it up to you. I quietly pulled the comforter over my head. From that day on, their attitude towards me became noticeably harsher. Even when I spoke to them, they wouldn't give me a proper response. It was because I was born with a disability. Since then, my mom has always tried to be considerate so that I wouldn't worry. However, despite everything, I did what I could on my own, and I never felt sorry for myself because I was born this way. I think Chloe's influence played a big part in that. Sorry, I overslept a bit because I stayed up late last night. It's okay. I managed to get dressed halfway. I'll help you. It's fine. You need to get ready first, Chloe. Since I started elementary school, Chloe had been helping me with my morning routine. Dad didn't approve of Chloe helping me and would complain.
How long are you going to keep doing this?
I'm almost done.
Brittany can do it herself. Come on, you can do it, right?
Yeah. While I was getting dressed, Chloe would sneak in to help when Dad wasn't looking. Sorry about earlier. It's okay. I can't keep troubling you, Chloe. Then Chloe hugged me. Why all of a sudden? I'll protect you, Brittany.
Then I'll do my best to protect you too, Chloe.
I felt our bond as sisters grow stronger. We tried not to talk much in front of Dad. We thought if he saw us getting along well, he would say something. I'm off to work. Okay. Have a good day. Dad would sometimes go to work even on his days off. Those days were like heaven for me. Normally, if I played games or something, he'd get irrationally angry and tell me to stop.
Since Dad's not here today, let's play a lot. Is that okay?
Sure, but don't overdo it.
I know.
Then I enjoyed playing games with Chloe in the living room. It must have been about 2 hours later. Mom had gone shopping at this time. I heard the door open and thought Mom had returned.
What are you doing?
Dad's voice made me turn around.
Dad, why are you here?
What about work?
I forgot something, so I came back. Where's Mom? She's out shopping. So, what are you two doing? Tell me.
Looking into Dad's eyes, I felt paralyzed with fear. It felt like my whole body turned to stone. Chloe noticed and tried to protect me.
We were playing a game. But it was my idea to invite Brittany. It's not her fault. Really?
Yes, really. However, as Dad pulled Chloe's arm, I feared she might get hit. Overwhelmed with a sense of duty to protect Chloe, I spoke up. It was me. I wanted to play.
What? So, please don't hit Chloe.
So it was you. Go to your room.
Yes.
I obeyed and headed to my room. At least the house was built to be wheelchair accessible. From my room, I heard Dad yelling. I cursed my helplessness. As I pondered, the door opened. I tensed, thinking it was Dad, but it was Mom.
Are you okay?
I'm fine. What about Chloe?
She's fine.
I tried to head to the living room.
Where are you going?
I need to help Chloe.
Really, it's okay. If you go, Dad will just get angrier.
Okay, I'll stay here. Mom was right. If I went, it might make things worse. I decided to trust Mom's assurance. I'm sorry. I should have been stronger. Dad was a domineering husband, and Mom was doing her best to avoid provoking him. It's not your fault. Thank you for everything. After a while, Chloe came to my room.
Chloe!
Dad's gone to work, so it's okay now.
Did he say anything to you?
Yeah, a little. But don't worry about it, Brittany. I'm fine. No matter the situation, Chloe always smiled. Despite going through the same hardships, she remained strong. Mom also stood between Dad and me, shielding me from his rage. I was always being helped. Determined not to burden them, I tried to find ways to help myself. Things changed when Chloe entered middle school. She started distancing herself from me. She used to help with daily tasks like dressing and bathroom needs. But as she got busier with sports and friends, I understood it couldn't be helped. I thought I just needed to endure it. I need to try harder. By then, my hands had also weakened, making it difficult to hold heavy objects. But I didn't give up. One day, I was organizing my room, putting away books from a shelf. That's when it happened. As I grabbed the shelf, it wobbled, and things started falling around me. Ouch. I need to pick this up quickly. However, because I was sitting in my wheelchair, I couldn't reach down to pick things up. As I struggled desperately, the door was thrown open.
What's all this noise? What the hell is going on here?
This was the worst. The last person I wanted to see this mess was Dad.
Well, this is...
I tried to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come out right. To Dad, it probably sounded like I was making excuses.
Who do you think is going to clean this up? Well, I
had no memory of Dad ever helping with anything. If he had, it was so insignificant that I couldn't recall it. Of course, I didn't say that out loud.
Honestly, why do you always have to cause trouble?
He sighed dramatically, looking at me with exasperation. He had no idea how it felt to be on the receiving end of that gaze. Dad's lecture showed no signs of stopping.
Unlike Chloe, you can't do anything, can you? Do you understand that? Huh?
I know I might not be able to do as much as Chloe, but I still want to do what I can on my own. If I was going to get yelled at anyway, I decided to voice my thoughts to Dad. I had a faint hope that maybe he'd understand. Do what you can, huh? Yes. Now he started to laugh out loud.
What?
You're funny. You think you can do anything? You, a disabled person? I had expected some harsh words, but this was complete rejection. He kept laughing. This wasn't how a father should treat his daughter. From that moment, I stopped thinking. I just waited for time to pass.
Hey! Are you even listening?
I didn't even respond.
Disgusting.
He spat the words at me and left the room. Alone in my cluttered room, I cried. From that day on, I swore I wouldn't cry anymore, even though I was just a child. From then on, Mom mainly took care of me. Of course, Dad didn't do anything. He didn't even seem to care.
Oh dear, you have a fever, don't you?
Huh? Do I?
You should stay home today.
But I'm fine. I can go. I tried desperately to convince Mom, but she insisted I stay home to avoid any complications. So, I stayed home that day. The reason I wanted to go to school so badly was because Dad happened to be off that day. I wanted to avoid being alone with him at all costs. But then, something unexpected happened. "Are you all right?" he asked as he entered my room. I pretended to be asleep, hoping he would leave soon. But Dad didn't leave. I covered myself with the comforter, tense, and waited. "I'm leaving these here for you." When I finally sat up, I saw sports drinks and jelly cups on the table. Despite myself, I felt a surge of happiness. I had never been cared for like this before. My mind was a whirlwind of confusion. What was his motive? That day, Dad came to check on me several times. Each time, I pretended to be asleep. "Are you all right?" Mom asked when she returned from her part-time job.
Yeah, I don't think I have a fever anymore.
Did something happen?
It's just... Dad seemed kind today.
Oh, good. Good? What was she talking about? Actually, I asked Dad to take care of you today.
You did?
It seems like it went well.
Well, he didn't really talk to me, but... I was surprised.
I gave him a stern talk. I hope he'll be kinder to you now. I felt conflicted. I had tried so hard to keep my emotions in check. And now I didn't know what to think. After that, just as Mom said, Dad began to show more concern for me. He started helping more and even began to talk to me a bit.
It looks like things are going well between you and Dad, don't they?
Does it?
It makes me happy to see you getting along with him. But there's still everything that happened before.
I know. It won't be easy. Honestly, I'd love to spend more time with you, too.
It's okay,
I said quickly, giving Chloe a smile. I hoped my relationship with Dad would continue to improve. However, when I started middle school, Dad's attitude toward me became stricter. I understood why. It was because Chloe had important exams coming up. I thought I could deal with it for that reason, but then I realized there was more to it. "I need to go to the bathroom," I told Dad. I could manage it on my own, but I chose to ask him on purpose.
"I'm busy right now. I can't help you." "What? You're a middle schooler now. If you can't even go to the bathroom by yourself, what are you going to do?"
I realized this was the real Dad. The kindness he had shown felt like a fleeting dream. And yet, the changes didn't stop there. Mom also started becoming distant. "Mom? I need something." "Sorry, I'm busy. Maybe later." I couldn't ask Chloe for help. As a result, my priority in the family kept dropping. Even when I asked for something, I was ignored. Even though I was growing up in middle school, it was painful not to connect with my family.
"From now on, Brittany will eat in her room." "What? Why?"
Understood? Mom and Chloe were silent. So, I started eating alone in my room more often. One reason for this was the result of a hospital checkup. My condition wasn't good, and the illness was progressing. Dad decided this after seeing the results. I began to wonder if I was really part of this family.
"Why only Brittany?"
I heard this while studying.
"Just get ready. If Brittany isn't going, then I'll stay home too."
Is that what you want? Chloe, your first choice was a private school, right? Yes, but… Stop this already. Are you defying me too? You can stay, but you'll give up on the private school. I felt like I had overheard something terrible. I finally understood the mystery. Dad was using the entrance exams to blackmail Mom and Chloe. I had never harbored any resentment towards Dad before, but this was too much. Yet, what could I do when my body wasn't cooperating? This thought occupied my mind from that day onward. I'm going out for a bit. I'm sorry, Brittany. I'll be fine. In the distance, I heard Dad calling out. It seemed he was telling them to hurry. Hurry up, go. I put on a brave face, not wanting to burden them with my sadness. They regularly went out without me. After a while, I got used to it. At first, they would hide their outings from me, but eventually, Dad stopped being discreet. All right. Let's eat out today. Come on, let's go.
Isn't this too sudden?
That's right. It's my decision. Move it. Oh, and Brittany, you stay home. Chloe, sitting next to me, started to protest, but I grabbed her arm to stop her. I'll be fine. Go ahead. Brittany seems to understand much better. Hey, do you know what they say about me at work? You don't, do you? Dad started talking about how pitiful his life was. I'm miserable at work because I'm the father of a disabled daughter. Do you have any idea how humiliating that is? Even if he said that, there was no way I could understand. Even if it were true, taking it out on his daughter was inexcusable. As a father, he was a complete failure. However, there was no way I, a middle school student, could defy my parent and survive. Especially in my case. I needed a wheelchair to move around, and having support made a huge difference. I'll manage on my own. It's okay. Mom and Chloe looked at me with concern. Besides, if I go with you, I'll just be a burden, and people will stare, right? Chloe didn't seem entirely convinced by my words, but she went out with our parents. It was wise not to defy Dad in his current state. I thought it was a prudent decision. Even after I entered high school, Dad's attitude towards me remained unchanged, but then something happened that made all the previous incidents seem trivial. What should I do? I watched my family leave and returned to my room. I couldn't help but wonder how long I would be trapped in this life. It happened during the summer break of my 3rd year in middle school. I'm sorry, but can you take care of Brittany for 3 days?
Aren't you coming with us?
You see, Brittany is a student preparing for exams and wants to focus on studying. Is that okay with you?
Yes.
In that case, leave her to us. And so, I was left at my grandparents' house. Dad breathed out a lie so easily. He didn't seem to feel any guilt towards his own parents. Seeing Dad wave at me with a smile filled me with an indescribable fear. Once Dad and the others were out of sight, Grandma asked me, "It's just us here, so no need to hold back."
What?
Are you really okay with not going?
If I'm there, Mom and Chloe won't have fun.
I absolutely hate that. I replied with determination. You're so kind, Brittany.
Not really.
But here, you don't have to worry about anyone's eyes. Do whatever you like.
Okay. Thank you.
Grandma might have understood what I was thinking. But she didn't pry. I felt truly comfortable. As a middle schooler, I didn't have the power or wisdom to change my situation. Besides, it wasn't pleasant to have others prying into my life. So, I was grateful that Grandma just watched over me warmly. 3 days later, Mom and Chloe came to pick me up.
Wait, is it just the two of you?
I'm sorry. Victor went home ahead of us.
Oh, I see.
Was Brittany okay? She was such a good girl. My advice is to keep an eye on her and make sure she's all right. Okay. I was listening to Mom and Grandma's conversation from behind a pillar. On the way home. I'm okay, really. You don't have to push yourself. That's right. We're on your side, Brittany. I know, but I don't want anything to happen to you too because of me. When we got back home, Dad continued to give me the cold shoulder. Things returned to their usual routine. Normally, this would have broken my spirit, but with Mom and Chloe supporting me, I barely managed to hold on. However, even they started to avoid me, probably because Dad had ordered them to. Being ignored by Dad was something I was used to, but having Mom and Chloe treat me like that was heart-wrenching. It felt like I was truly all alone. It's okay. Hang in there, you can do it. Eventually, those words became my mantra. After that, I tried to stay in my room as much as possible when I was home. I thought that if I stayed in my room, I wouldn't have to interact with anyone and wouldn't have to deal with any unnecessary hurt. However, I realized that this was a mistake. It was a Sunday morning in the spring of my 10th grade year. When I woke up, the house seemed unusually quiet. I went to the living room and found a piece of paper on the table. Sorry, but we don't need someone like you. Do your best to survive.
What is this?
There was a note on the table. It was addressed to me. Sure, I couldn't use my legs properly, but I didn't deserve this. Dad must have reached his limit. Then my smartphone rang with a call from Dad.
Hello?
Is this Brittany? Did you see the letter?
Yes, I saw it, but...
Well, that's how it is. Bye.
Wait a minute.
What do you want?
Of course, I have something to say. What's with the letter?
It is what it is. I'm tired of raising a daughter like you. Don't worry about us. With that, he abruptly hung up the phone. Desperately thinking about what to do, I decided to call Mom. Hello, Mom?
From the sound of your voice, I guess you saw the letter.
They said someone like me is a burden. They even called me a monster.
I see. But don't worry. What? Because you're not the daughter of that worthless man. What are you talking about? I don't understand. Listen carefully. Call the number I'm about to give you. Wait a minute. Explain it properly.
I'm sorry. Victor is nearby. I'll call you back. I was left in a state of shock. If what Mom was saying was true, then What does it mean that I'm not Dad's child? I couldn't find an answer no matter how much I thought about it, so I called the number Mom gave me. The person who answered the phone introduced himself as a lawyer. His name was Mr. Williams.
Mom told me to call you. Yes, I understand. I'd like to discuss things further with you.
So, I went to the lawyer's office as directed. There, I learned the meaning of Mom's words. And I found out about my true birth. At first, I was in complete disbelief, but it seemed that Mom and Chloe had kept it hidden for my sake. After that, I started living on my own. Thanks to Mr. Williams, I was able to live comfortably. 8 years quickly passed since Mom's revelation. And in these 8 years, there were some happy moments too. Chloe graduated from college and started living on her own. Chloe? What's up?
Sorry for the sudden call. It seems Dad found out where you live. What?
Oh, and just so you know, neither Mom nor I said anything to him.
I understand.
Actually, even after living separately, Chloe and Mom kept in touch with me. Of course, they kept it a secret from Dad. So, does that mean he's coming here?
Probably.
I see. All right, it's time for some payback, don't you think? What? I'm able to live like this because of you and Mom, right?
That might be true, but
So, let me repay you a little. And there's the matter with Mom too. That's true. I did leave the house in a hurry.
it's not your fault, Chloe.
A week after Chloe's call. As she predicted, Dad showed up at my condo. The doorbell rang, and I went to answer it. Hello?
It's been a while, Brittany.
What are you doing here?
How can a cripple like you afford to live in a high-rise condo like this?
Well, why don't you tell me?
How dare you talk to your dad like that?
Glancing behind Dad, I saw Mom standing there looking apologetic. From her expression, I could tell she had been struggling even after I left.
Shall I explain it to you then?
What? I began explaining to Dad how I was able to live like this. As I spoke, he started hurling insults at Mom.
What is this about? I knew nothing about it. I intended to tell you at first. But when you found out Brittany had a disability, you made a disgusted face. Of course I did. Who wants to raise someone else's disabled child?
I remembered the shock I felt when Mr. Williams told me. He explained that I was the child of Mom's best friend. My real dad had died in an accident, and my real mom was terminally ill with only a short time left to live. That's when they turned to my current mom. In other words, I was adopted. Moreover, my real mom had left a substantial amount of money to ensure I wouldn't face hardships. The house I now live in had originally belonged to my real parents.
Blaming Mom is not right. Shut up! No, I won't. And I know about the horrible things you've done to her.
Even after I started living separately, Dad's rampages didn't stop. His aggression, which had previously been directed at me, now targeted Mom. Isn't that right? I looked to Mom for agreement. She nodded quietly.
You have no proof. None.
What if I said I do?
What?
I took out my smartphone and played a recording. It captured Dad verbally abusing Mom and even raising his hand against her. See? Do you get it now?
When did you?
Even though we lived apart, we never stopped communicating. You didn't notice, did you? Well, of course not.
Damn you!
Yelling won't help. We have plenty of evidence. You know what this means, right?
What are you planning?
I gave Mom a signal with my eyes.
I'm leaving you.
What? It's only natural. But don't worry, Mom will be living here with me.
You can't do this to me.
I don't care about your opinion, Dad. He probably didn't know, but this had been planned for a long time.
You little cripple, you think you can get away with this?
Dad, in his rage, seemed ready to resort to violence. At that moment,
Stop it!
a voice came from the back of the house.
Who the hell are you? This is my husband. Husband? Nice to meet you. I'm Aaron, her husband.
Dad, stunned, lowered his raised hand.
Did you know about this too?
Mom nodded. Of course. Even Chloe knows.
You did this without your parents' consent. How dare you?
I'm an adult now. There's no issue. Anyway, why don't you leave? It would have been great if he left then, but of course, he wasn't giving up that easily. Wait a minute. You've inherited more than just this house, haven't you?
And? As your parent, I have a right to that inheritance.
What nonsense. He had no such right. Seeing his desperate face almost made me laugh.
What's so funny? You're just so off the mark.
Dad stomped his foot in frustration. I'm sure you'll have a tough time ahead. Good luck. You'll also have to deal with the compensation from the divorce trial. Oh, and I've already talked to Grandpa and Grandma. So don't bother trying to rely on them.
You planned all of this?
Dad suddenly looked very subdued. Maybe he finally realized his mistakes. We have nothing more to talk about. Goodbye.
Wait, please. I'm sorry.
Dad made a sincere apology, something I had never seen before. It made me wonder what it felt like to swallow your pride and apologize to someone you've always disregarded. But no matter what he said, my feelings wouldn't change. There's no point in doing that, just leave already.
Even after all this?
Yes. If you don't leave, I'll call the police. I have evidence, and you might get arrested. My words seemed to scare Victor, and he fled the scene. I exhaled deeply, feeling the tension release. Good job.
Thank you. I was really nervous.
But are you sure this is okay?
Living here together?
Yes. It's not a problem. We talked about it and decided together. Right?
That's right. Here, we have freedom.
Then, I told Chloe about the outcome.
I'm so glad.
See? It turned out okay, didn't it?
I really wanted to come over there too.
Your support is enough. Come visit us sometime. Yes, I'll do that. Thus, Diana and I were freed from Victor's curse. There was still one final step, but we celebrated that night with a toast. After that, Diana and I visited our lawyer, Mr. Williams. Since we already had all the evidence, things proceeded smoothly.
Thank you for everything.
You're welcome. It's my job after all.
Please, make sure my dad gets punished.
The police will handle the assault, but I'll take care of the compensation in the divorce. 2 weeks after our consultation, Victor and Diana's divorce was finalized. Now, Diana wouldn't have to endure Victor's insults or abuse anymore. I was truly happy about that. After the divorce was finalized, we moved all of Diana's belongings to our house.
Thank you so much.
It's okay. This is the least I can do. Besides, I'll keep repaying you for all the help you've given me.
You don't have to do that.
I want to, so it's fine. Diana joined us, and a new chapter of our lives began. Chloe also started visiting whenever she could.
Finally, we have peace.
Thank you, Chloe, for everything.
Of course. Even though we're not blood related, Brittany, you're my only precious sister.
Yes. I noticed Diana had a concerned look on her face. What's wrong?
Oh, it's a call from Victor.
A call? Let me see. I took Diana's smartphone and answered the call. I was wrong. Please come back. Diana is not coming back. Is that you, Brittany? I was not myself before. Please give me another chance.
Sorry, that's impossible. Don't call again.
I hung up and blocked his number, then returned the phone to Diana.
Was everything okay?
Absolutely. So, don't worry. Apparently, Victor quit his job. I don't know what happened after that. He must be living alone somewhere. But it doesn't matter where he is or what he's doing anymore. On the other hand, we are enjoying happy days together as a family. I've never felt this liberated in my life. I want to continue walking a happy path with my family. Tomorrow, my husband, Carlos, will be coming back home. I needed to check his fishing gear, so I went into the garage. It was so hot that I thought I might faint if I didn't hurry while looking for the fishing equipment. Then it happened. There was a bang, and the garage door slammed shut. I was startled and turned towards the door in the pitch-black garage. I tried pushing the door, but it wouldn't open, probably locked from the outside. Sweat poured down my face as panic set in. Carlos's stepchild, Leah, must have been waiting for me to go into the garage. After all, she never opened up to me and only ever caused trouble. "Hey, what are you doing in there?" Leah said, laughing mockingly at me as I stood there in shock.
Leah, open the door. Stop playing around.
She ignored my plea and said, "I'm going out. I'll be back before curfew."
Wait, Leah. Let me out.
Leah laughed and left me locked in the garage. It was boiling hot, like being cooked in a pot. I regretted not drinking water before being trapped, but it was too late and I had no drink. What should I do? I left my smartphone outside, so I couldn't call anyone. Sweat was pouring down, draining the water from my body. I couldn't believe she would do something so dangerous. Time dragged on in the scorching heat. The temperature kept rising. I felt sad, thinking that all my efforts to be a good mother had been in vain. Did I make a mistake marrying Carlos? The heat made my head feel faint. If I stayed in the garage any longer, I would collapse from heatstroke. As I was about to lose consciousness, I faintly heard the doorbell ring. Someone was there. I mustered my last bit of strength to pound on the door and shout. It was Carlos's old friend, Mike, a police officer, who had rung the bell. At that moment, Leah, oblivious to everything, came back in high spirits. Her face turned pale as she saw what was happening. 3 years ago, I married Carlos, who had a stepchild. It was a marriage with some uncertainty, but from the outside, we looked like a happy family of 3. Of course, I was eager to get along with Leah, but to her, I was a stranger. Leah adored her father. It's common for girls to have a crush on their dads, especially since they had been living alone together, supporting each other. Their bond was naturally deep. Carlos doted on his daughter and was incredibly indulgent. Sometimes it seemed too much. But I married him because we loved each other, and I believed in our mutual affection. I wanted us to live happily as a family and be accepted by Leah. However, my efforts were in vain, and Leah only caused trouble and never opened up to me.
You're just a stand-in for Mom.
Lee's words were like poison, and they hurt. Sometimes, I felt jealous of his affection for his daughter. Why did he marry me? Wasn't his daughter enough? These silly thoughts would torment me. Just as my faith in our bond wavered, Carlos was assigned to work alone. Every day, Lee's words, calling me a substitute, fueled my anxiety. Of course, he loved his previous wife, but that was in the past. Now, he loved me. I kept repeating this mantra to myself. Hoping to bond with Leah, I thought giving her a gift might make her happy. So, I bought a blouse from her favorite brand that Carlos mentioned. It was a cute blouse that I thought would suit her, but she threw it in the trash right in front of me. Heartbroken, I turned to Carlos, but he brushed it off, doting on his daughter.
Leah has strong preferences, she just didn't like it.
He didn't see it as harassment. Leah acted sweet around Carlos, hiding her behavior towards me. He couldn't believe good Leah would do such things. I realized I couldn't rely on him. I had to handle this myself. I'm an adult, and I need to correct a child's bad behavior. Resolute, I decided to confront Leah. She continued to spew venom at me, fueling my anxiety about Carlos's absence. Still, I managed to keep myself composed, responding with a smile. I had decided to only scold her if she did something truly wrong. However, my attitude only emboldened her. Complaining about the food or leaving the lunch I made early in the morning untouched was still manageable. But then there were filthy socks, so dirty I wondered where she found them, and trash scattered all over the room. It was like dealing with a mischievous child. I was constantly cleaning up, every day felt like a battle. But this wasn't something to scold her for. She was just acting out because she missed her father, or so I told myself. My solace was the phone calls from Carlos at night and the music box we had chosen together on our honeymoon. Its beautiful melody and the memories of our honeymoon helped soothe my weary heart. Leah must have known how much I treasured it. And she probably resented the frequent calls from Carlos to me. One day, the music box was gone. I found it outside, smashed to pieces on the road. My heart shattered just like that music box. I had always tried to endure her antics, but this time I couldn't hold back. I went into the house, straight to Lee's room, and for the first time, I unleashed my anger. Always smiling, never reacting to her harassment, I was now furious, my eyes blazing. Leah was clearly shocked. Maybe she realized she had gone too far. After that, she was quieter. She would leave whenever she saw me. Since Carlos had been away, we hadn't had dinner together. Leah didn't like my dinners and had always been able to cook for herself. She would prepare her own meals. Though our lives were now more separate, I found peace in the quiet. I sighed as I looked at the box containing the broken music box. This couldn't go on. Had I made a mistake by getting angry? I didn't know what to do, and time passed with my mind clouded. I didn't want to face her either, so our lives continued to diverge. The relentless heat wave made the air conditioner run at full blast every day. I thought I'd finish my shopping early in the morning and return home. Even in the morning, it wasn't cool. I came back drenched in sweat and quickly put away the groceries. Tomorrow, Carlos would be home. I needed to check his fishing gear, so I went into the garage. It was so hot that I thought I might faint if I didn't hurry while looking for the fishing equipment. Then it happened. There was a bang, and the garage door slammed shut. I was startled and turned towards the door in the pitch-black garage. Had the wind closed the door? I tried pushing it, but it wouldn't open. It was locked from the outside. Sweat poured down my face as panic set in. Leah might have been waiting for me to go into the garage. She probably thought she could get back at me by trapping me in there. And she followed me and locked the door. I stood there, stunned and dismayed. "Hey, what are you doing in there?" I heard Lee's mocking voice.
Leah, open the door. Stop messing around.
Leah ignored my words and said, "I'm going out. I'll be back before curfew."
Wait, Leah. Let me out.
Leah laughed and left me locked in the garage. It was boiling hot, like being cooked in a pot. Especially since I had just returned from shopping. I had been sweating and wanting a drink, but I thought I'd take care of this first and then relax. I regretted not having a drink first, but it was too late and I had no drink. What should I do? I had left my smartphone outside and couldn't call anyone. Sweat was pouring down, draining the water from my body. I couldn't believe she would do something so dangerous. I hoped she would come back soon, but there was no sign of that. Time dragged on in the scorching heat. The temperature kept rising. Did she really hate me that much? Enough to endanger my life? To the point of endangering my life. I felt a deep sadness, wondering if everything I had done was meaningless. Did I make a mistake marrying Carlos if it meant having to live in such discord? The heat was making my head feel faint. If I stayed in the garage any longer, I would pass out from heat stroke. Just as I was about to lose consciousness, I faintly heard the doorbell ring. Someone is here. I mustered the last of my strength to pound on the door and shout. The person who rang the doorbell was Mike, Carlos's old friend and a police officer. Carlos and Mike often went fishing together. Mike had gotten the date wrong for Carlos's return, so he had come to pick up him for another fishing trip. When he got no response to the doorbell, he assumed Carlos was preparing the gear and decided to check. Mike, knowing where the fishing equipment was stored and where the garage was, went straight to it. Luckily, Carlos's favorite fishing gear was in the garage where I was trapped. Mike, hearing my desperate cries for help, rushed to unlock and open the door. As the door opened, I collapsed on the spot.
Francine! Hold on!
Mike said, rescuing me and giving first aid before calling Carlos to come home. He took me to the hospital, where I received 4 fluids for severe dehydration. The doctor's words echoed in my mind. A little later and I might have died. Realizing how close I had come to death, I felt a renewed sense of pity for Leah. How could Carlos's child do something so foolish? When I returned home from the hospital, Carlos came back in a hurry. Mike told Carlos about what Leah had done, and Carlos was shocked. He finally listened to the various harassments I had endured from Leah. Carlos had only ever seen Leah as a sweet and good child. Learning that she had done such terrible things felt like a blow to the head, he said. He looked pained, realizing he had believed Lee's words and caused me so much suffering.
I never thought of you as a replacement for my late wife. I didn't know Leah was saying such things to you.
He understood the loneliness and strain I had felt trying to endure it all alone. He had heard from Leah that she didn't like my gift. But he didn't know she had thrown it in the trash. He had noticed my tired voice on the phone but didn't think much of it.
I'm so sorry, I didn't understand you better,
Carlos said, apologizing with his shoulders slumped. He told me sincerely that I was his irreplaceable wife, not a substitute. As I took in his words, the feelings that had clouded my heart began to clear. I was glad I had kept faith. Mike, who had been watching our exchange with a smile, suddenly folded his arms with a serious look. Lee's actions could be considered a crime. It might be difficult to overlook this. Mike was an active police officer. We had explained everything at the hospital, and covering it up would be difficult. Meanwhile, she was completely absorbed in having fun, having forgotten about locking me in the garage. She finally noticed just before coming home. She hadn't realized the severity of today's heat because she had been in air-conditioned places. She probably thought I would be mad at her for a while, but didn't expect it to be this serious. She apparently thought it wasn't her fault for making things awkward by angering me. She thought it was strange for me to get so angry over something like that. Unaware of everything, Leah came home in a good mood. The moment she opened the door, she froze. Carlos, who wasn't supposed to be there, was glaring at her with an expression she had never seen before. In that brief moment, she must have processed a lot. She had never seen her dad look at her with such a terrifying expression. Leah looked at each of our faces, trying to understand what had happened. Seeing Mike, the police officer, her face turned pale. Her face showed she realized she had done something terribly wrong. Mike began speaking in a calm voice. He explained how many cases there are of children dying when left in cars on extremely hot days, and that metal garages can reach similar temperatures. He explained that what she did today amounted to attempted murder. Leah listened solemnly as Mike spoke. When he asked if she intended to become a murderer, she turned pale and shook her head. I felt a slight relief, realizing that Leah hadn't thought that far ahead. She was still a child with immature thoughts. However, his anger did not subside. If I had lost my life, it would have been an irreversible mistake. Carlos decided to make Leah live on her own. He provided only minimal support, forcing her to live with basic necessities. Leah, who had lived a life of luxury, buying what she wanted and playing as she pleased, now had to struggle to even eat. About a month later, I heard from one of Lee's friends. She initially resented Carlos and me, wondering why things had turned out this way.
I never intended to commit attempted murder. I just wanted to teach her a lesson.
She reportedly cried a lot at first, saying this. And she said she was glad I was okay, realizing that if I had died, it would have been irreparable. In the end, she seemed to be busy every day with studying and part-time work. After tiring herself out at work, she returned to a room with no food. Remembering how she had thrown away the lunches and dinners I made for her, she thought it was payback. Returning to a dark, empty room and enduring hunger, she realized for the first time what it was like to be truly hungry. She had never really experienced true hunger before. She didn't realize how painful it could be. The room occasionally got cool breezes from the open window. But bugs also came in, so she couldn't leave it open. The fan blew warm air, making the heat unbearable. She realized how difficult it was to endure the heat in a room without air conditioning. Leah reflected deeply on how terrible it was to lock me in the garage on such a hot day. I was surprised to hear she said such things. Being abandoned by the father who doted on her must have been a huge shock. She had been spoiled and given plenty of allowance. She had looked down on kids who had to work part-time jobs. Her first job was rough, and she was constantly scolded by others. Leah, raised as a pampered princess, was seen as a useless worker. Despite her frustration, she had to work to afford food. She endured it because she couldn't bear the thought of going truly hungry. She must have been gritting her teeth and working hard. Carlos's long business trip finally ended, and our life together as a couple began. Carlos, reflecting on everything, listened to me and took my concerns seriously. Thanks to that, we communicated well and felt a deeper bond. We lived happily together, almost like newlyweds. He sometimes went fishing with Mike and brought back fish. As a result, I learned many new fish recipes. It might seem like we were a perfectly fine couple, but that wasn't the case. There was an unhealable wound between us. It was about Leah, whom we had driven out of the house. Carlos, out of consideration for me, never brought up her, but I knew he sometimes looked troubled. As a parent, he couldn't help but be concerned about his daughter. He must have been worried. I wish he would just go see her. It wouldn't bother me at all. Sure, I nearly died back then, but I know Leah didn't mean for it to go that far. She was still a child, and it was just a prank. Her harassment was like a mischievous child's pranks. Though I remained silent, I couldn't bring myself to hate her. Now that she seemed to have grown up and reflected on her actions, I thought it was time for a change. Carlos had never been so angry with his daughter before. After taking such a hard stance, he found it difficult to back down now. He insisted he didn't regret it. At that time, it was necessary. Carlos himself seemed to think it was about time, but he felt stuck. Watching him, I couldn't help but worry about Leah, who had been thrown out. I occasionally sent her care packages. Eventually, I started receiving thank you emails from Leah. When I let out a surprised shout at the unexpected email, Carlos looked at me curiously. I was so happy that I showed Carlos the email.
Has she grown up a bit?
He asked with a pleased smile. For Carlos, pushing away the daughter he doted on must have been tough. I felt the same. I never wanted to be at odds with Leah. I wanted the three of us to live happily together as a family. Even though such a thing happened, I sometimes regretted thinking that I could have handled it better. It wasn't just Lee's fault. After that, I enthusiastically sent care packages and frequently exchanged emails with her. One day, I received a long email from Leah. In it, she apologized for all the harassment she had caused, including the garage incident. I was so happy that she finally understood, tears welled up in my eyes. The feeling that I wanted to get along with her had reached her. I showed it to Carlos, and we both shed tears. There had been tough days, but Leah was truly growing up. I was glad we had come this far. I wanted to reward myself, Carlos, who endured the pain of pushing Leah away, and Leah, who overcame it. After that, we frequently visited each other, and the three of us were able to have meals together. When I excitedly talked about baking sweets with her next time, Carlos showed a genuinely relieved smile.